There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
I am just about to pee my pants with excitement that I'm getting Mel of Mel's Bookland Adventure on my channel. We have been friends for several years on BookTube, and we've never had a Zoom chat. We've had lots of intimate chats on Voxer, but we're just meeting through the ether this way, and she's on Bite Size Book Chats. Mel, hello.
Hello, everyone.
Oh
hello,
my
Sean.
God.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
when we made these plans, Mel was kind of on hiatus on her channel, but she's kind of come back with some series of wonderful vlogs, as I call them, or vlogs, as normal people do. So I don't have to pester her about coming back to BookTube because she is back, but she's also gracing me with her presence to talk about the memoir, Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. Do you think I'm pronouncing that right?
I think her original, like her family, like her dad's family, came from Germany, I believe, at one point. So it would be Zauner, but I believe in America most people would call it Zauner or Zauner. I've looked it up when I went onto a deep dive on her after reading the memoir, and I found all sorts of pronunciations in interviews. So, you know, God knows.
Tell us about the memoir.
So 2021 is a little bit of the year of the memoir for me. I have read, very unlike me, a lot of memoirs this year that I really loved. And I think her memoir, Crying in H Mart, is probably one of my favorites this year. Writing about grief, and that's what the book is essentially about in the broadest terms, is incredibly difficult, I find. You know, it's like it can very easily go into the melodramatic, or it can feel shallow, because how do you even begin writing about like the pain that you experience? So Michelle Zauner writes about the loss of her mother to cancer. Her mother married an American. She's Korean. She came to America because of the marriage. She met him in Korea. He was a car salesman for the US troop station there. And they came back to the United States, and Michelle was born there. And then she had a very difficult time sometimes with her mother. There was love there, but there was also conflict, and there was a lot of, you know, issues with regards to her mom trying to bring her up in many ways in a very Korean way, but at the same time also being like in, you know, rural America, the kind of America, you know, where you have a town and then you live still half an hour outside of the town in the middle of nowhere. And so we start this book with Michelle talking about, you know, like crying in H Mart, and how kind of love for her mum and her connection to her is now only the food that she can eat. Yeah, like to bring back those moments. And she really explores this whole thing. It's like, you know, what is left if you're only linked to your own culture, like the Korean culture, when these people disappear, yeah, when the people that anchor you in that other culture that you're a part of disappear, are you then still part of that culture? Can you still claim to also be Korean? And she does speak very little Korean herself. You know, can you then even claim to be still Korean? And what if these people, these links, like disappear? What are you left with? What I found, I mean, I cried every chapter. Yeah. I also found it strangely really relatable.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like a book that would be a Mel book for obvious reasons.
Yeah. So it's just like, because, you know, I mean, I love any book that deals with belonging. Yeah. And our right to belong in a certain place. And also the question whether it is actually important to belong in order to claim something for yourself. Yeah. Like in this case, you know, is it important for her to speak Korean and, you know, and to regularly go back to Korea in order for her to be also consider herself Korean? Is that an essential part of her being? And what I also liked as well is like this exploration of love and the various forms it can take. That you can like love someone like she loved her mother, and her mother clearly loved her, but it's also complicated and messy and awful and full of arguments, and not understanding each other, or maybe even like understanding each other too well, yeah, and not liking what you understand. It's all these kind of aspects of grief as well. And the book is sort of like roughly like in this delineation of writing the kind of stages of grief, you know, like the disbelief, the anger, the frustration, the accusation, and then the slowly coming to terms with it. On top of it, Michelle has a very complicated relationship with her dad, because although he was always there, he was not the most present of dads, you know, physical presence, emotional presence, not so much. He also has to come to terms with that. So it's like when she lost her mum, she also lost her dad in many ways, because that relationship was hinged on her mother. And when the hinge disappeared, that relationship disappeared as well for, you know, various reasons. I didn't know about Michelle Zauner. I'd never heard of her. I know she's very well known in the United States because she's the front woman of a band called Japanese Breakfast,
Really?
which I've now found out. So she's fairly well known in this kind of like punky alternative kind of scene, but I never heard of her. And I think that was really great actually going into this book, because I had no preconceived notions about what kind of person and personality she is. So I could just take everything I read that she wrote face value. And I think that was great.
That's great. You are a really easy interview because I don't need to ask you any questions. This is fantastic.
Just talk for hours.
That's perfect. Is she still young? So her mother got sick when the author Michelle Zauner was 25, right?
Yeah. She was like in her 20s and living away from home at that point. Yeah.
And is she quite a bit older than that now? Do you know?
I think it's when the book was published, The Death of Her Mother was 9 years ago. So she's in her 30s.
Okay,
yeah,
so there's that much of a perspective on things.
Yeah.
It's not written in that with the immediacy of in the moment.
No.
Okay.
So there's a lot, and also, I mean, I think she acknowledges that, you know, like, because she dives back into moments of her childhood, of her upbringing, of trips with her mother to Korea, and then to moments or the time when her mom got really ill. So she kind of both has let's say, an accounting like of the storyline, but also a lot of reflection. And I think what this memoir is so outstanding in terms of writing about grief is that it never becomes melodramatic. Yes, I cried a lot because I related so much to many things, yeah, that she was talking about, you know, like emotions, situations, the mental struggle with when you're faced with a problem. So I cried a lot, I think, not because it was melodramatic, but because I felt I could relate so much to her words.
Which is very different than feeling like you're being manipulated by the book.
Yeah. So she doesn't do that at all. And she's also not casting herself in a glorious light. It's never this kind of thing of like, oh, my mother just misunderstood me and I just needed this or whatever. And now I'm sad she's gone. So it's not that either. You know, she very clearly says that it worked both ways. Yeah, the conflict was for both ways. And I think that is so great because, you know, quite often we accuse someone else of bringing the conflict to us when usually, you know, it is more of a two-way street. Yeah.
Very honest. So do you like the music of Japanese Breakfast?
I think if I were younger, that would totally be my jam. I like it. You know, I think she's very creative. And I like the lyrics, and unsurprisingly, they're very reflective as well. But it wouldn't go onto my heavy rotation.
Well, I think I need to check this out. Do you think it's a Sean book? You know Sean books better than I do.
I don't think so.
Okay. Why not?
I think you wouldn't be inspired by her writing style. The content you might enjoy, but I think the way she writes would wind you up.
I think I'll have to give it a try because it certainly
Yeah.
sounds interesting. Well, this is great, Mel, and I don't have to ask you to come back because I know you're coming back. So thank you for this one, and stay tuned for her next appearance in a few weeks' time. I'm delighted to welcome Marina from Cyprus. Welcome, Marina.
Hello, Sean. Glad to see you.
This is really exciting. I've never talked to anyone from Cyprus in my life. So fabulous. And what an interesting book you've read. As I Crossed a Bridge of Dreams, Recollection of a Woman in 11th Century Japan by Lady Sarashina, published or whatever, I don't know if it was published, but it was written in the early 11th century and translated from the Japanese by Ivan Morris. And you really loved this, or certainly really liked it, didn't you?
I did enjoy it very much, yes. It isn't a very long book. It's only about 80 pages. It calls itself a memoir, although really it seems to be a record of events that she considered important in her development as a person rather than events in her life. It also seems to be like something like a travel book. I mean, she records journeys and pilgrimages, and she doesn't say anything about her marriage or her children, which presumably were important to her.
She started this diary when she was 11 and wrote in it for decades. Is that right?
I think the events that she records started when she was about 12. I don't know if she was writing at the time or whether she wrote them at a much later age.
Recollections. She was a generation after Tale of Genji.
Yes. The first event that she describes is a journey that she took with her family, returning from a distant province in Japan back to the capital. Right. Her father was governor in that distant province and his appointment had ended. So they had to return. And that takes up a large part of the book, which isn't very long anyway. And she describes what she saw, the landscape, people they met along the way. She describes stories that people told her and also dreams that she had. And she mentions that even when she was at this distant part of the Japan, she had heard about the tales and she had this longing to read them. And she prayed to Buddha that she would return to the capital so that she would have access to the tales and read them.
Wow.
And her wish came true.
Her wish came true. Did she comment on the tale of Genji?
Yes, she doesn't comment as she's like a Don Quixote who is influenced by the tales of knights that he reads, that she was also influenced. She dreams of meeting a knight. I haven't read the tale of Genji, but I suspect that from what I gather that there is a knight in them, and she dreams of meeting this knight who will be her companion in life. And her decisions, especially when she was young, were affected by this dream world she created as a result of her reading the tales of Genji.
Fascinating. Now, I did read the tale of Genji a couple of years ago, and it was tough going. There were parts of it that I really loved, but there were other parts that were horrifically misogynist and so on. Interesting. There were some gay scenes in it, gay incidents recorded. Lots of interesting things happening, and of course, the historical value of the text. But I'm not sure that I would want to meet a knight like Genji if I were her. He was a rogue, if ever there were one.
She lived in a time period which was much nearer, and yes. I imagine. I mean, she also mentions at some point that she would like him to keep her in some remote part of Japan, I imagine, and he would only visit her once a year.
Well, he was a busy man, romantically and sexually, so that would probably suit him fine too. So does she create a dream world in this book?
She talks about her dreams, and these dreams, I mean, she describes them. These dreams are all dreams where priests or, I don't know, goddesses, I can't remember the details, give her injunctions about what she should do to develop spiritually. And that's what they appear to be. At a later stage, she says that these dreams are interpreted as what she should have done so that she would have progressed in the world, so she would have had a better life, and that she paid no attention to any of the dreams. She didn't follow the injunctions. So that's why her life didn't turn out as she would have liked it to have turned out.
So is it got kind of a regretful tone?
Towards the end, yes. So it's distinctly in two parts. The first 2/3 are dreams and hopes and her wanting to meet someone that was a kindred spirit. And then there's a break. Sort of you realize, you think you get lost. What's happening now? And then she is married, she has children, she goes on pilgrimages, but there's always this sense of regret. And when her husband dies, that regret becomes even stronger, because she no longer has the same privileged position. Her children grow up and leave her, and she's alone. And she just looks back on mistakes. And there are no details. The whole thing is very sketchy at all times.
Nobody really knows even what her name was. The translator, Ivan Morris, he named her Lady Sarashina, and the other name that she has gone by, I think in Japanese, Sugawara no Takasue no Musume. So those are the two names by which we know her. And so it's kind of like Shikibu with Genji's. The details are quite sketchy about who wrote it. How would you describe the reading experience? Entertaining, educational, amusing?
I enjoyed it because it was very short and it was an easy read.
Yeah.
It was never tiring because it's so sketchy. It was easy to read, easy to get through. And I'm interested in seeing how someone who lived in the medieval times, a woman who lived in the medieval times, even if it was in a far away country as Japan, how she fared and what her life was, because it's so distant in my mind that I tend to think of women as non-entities in those times. And of course, that's not true. They were just not given a voice.
That's right. So it's fascinating that Japan has at least 2 women who wrote from way back then, and I don't know of any comparable.
There's a third one. I think there's someone who wrote the Pillow Book.
Yeah, that's right. Which I don't know so much about, but yes. And in the West, what do we have from that era for women's voices? I don't know of many or any.
I think there is a Greek princess who wrote the Elegiac, and she was a princess in Byzantium. I think she must have been later, though, not as early as Lady Sarashina. And she wrote about her father and the intrigues in the court at the time. So that's the only, I was thinking of that, and I think that's the only one I know, and I should probably research it.
Well, but it sounds fascinating on several levels.
It came to a very abrupt end. And
so maybe she died.
It doesn't, they don't know anything. After she has finished writing this, they have no record of her. The only other thing that might be interesting was the book itself had an adventure in that the manuscript was preserved in Japan for a certain amount of time, and then they decided to do routine maintenance to it. So it was taken apart and put together, and it was put together in a way that no one could understand it anymore. It was all, the pages were all mixed up.
Oh,
this happened in the 18th century, and it was only in the last century that scholars went back and tried to put it back together again in a way that made sense. And this is the book that I have read, is the book that as put together in the 19th century and not what came back. And I wonder, I mean, I have wondered if pages were lost because of that jump.
It's a history as a text, as a physical text, is also fascinating. Well, I'm definitely going to check it out. And Marina, I hope you'll come back and talk to me about another book sometime.
Whenever you want.
That would be lovely. Thank you so much. This is a special treat to welcome back for her second appearance on my bite-sized book chats, but she's been on my channel umpteen times. Cecilia from Singapore. Welcome back, girlfriend.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good. We're here to talk, and for those of you that don't know, Cecilia is the queen of NYR book clubs. She's got one, unless things have changed recently, she hosts one in Singapore, in-person NYRB Books book club, and also one on the bookish app Litsy. So we're here to talk about one of those recent reads from the NYRB publisher, and that is Free Day. And the best we could find for researching the pronunciation of this author's name, who was an Italian-French writer, we heard a French interviewer pronounce it something like Inès Cagnati. Cagnati. The G is barely there. And translated from the French by Liesl Schillinger. This one sounds fascinating, Cecilia.
Yes, it is.
Tell us
This is
about
the one.
it. Great.
Yeah. I think this is the only book by Inès that was translated into English. And I think it's a very good translation work with this NYRB Classics edition. It's not a cheerful read. It's a very gloomy, sad, and a little bit heartbreaking as well. It's a story of Gala, who is a 14-year-old who came from a poor French family who's living in a poor French village. And she struggles with poverty, and she doesn't feel loved by the parents because, she's sharing with so many siblings. Unfortunately, she has an abusive father. So the whole novel is about her perspective, about solitude, violence, and cruelty in her childhood. And she is actually studying in a high school, so about 4 hours cycling from home. Yeah, that's crazy. So
4 hours each way?
Yes.
For each one way, 4 hours.
One way, 4 hours. Yeah.
8 hours a day on the bike to go to school.
No. She actually stays in a dormitory. Yeah, but she will visit the family during the weekend. Yeah, and she has a bicycle, an old bicycle, and it's really heartbreaking. It's like she has to face the rain and the strong wind, and she's cycling for 4 hours just to see the family. And the moment she reaches home, she doesn't feel the love. From a perspective of a teenager like this, she obviously has a self-esteem issue when dealing with her friends in high school. Yeah, lots of problem. But I'm not going to say so much about the end, but the end is even more heartbreaking.
Wow.
Yeah.
So she, the author, was born in 1937 in rural France to Italian immigrant parents. They were Italian agricultural workers originally from northern Italy. So how autobiographical is this book? Do you know?
Actually there's an interview at the back of the book, and she mentioned that is sort of autobiographical.
I see she has described her own childhood as being deeply unhappy. This novel was originally published in French in 1973, and I believe she published 4 novels in her lifetime.
Yes.
Wow. So the tone is quite dark.
Yeah.
And is it just the family that are characters in the story?
Just a family, and then one of her closest friend. It is a short read. It's only like 133 pages.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you said that the story opens when she's a high school student.
Yes.
And it goes to how far past that?
Only during that period, maybe
all set in high school. Oh.
Yeah, also in high school. I think just maybe like 1 or 2 weeks of her stay in high school. Yeah.
And it has a very tragic or sad ending that you're not going to tell us about.
Yeah.
Did it make you want to read more by her?
Yes. Yes, actually, I searched whether she has another work translated into English, and I couldn't find one.
No, I think this is the only one so far.
The only one.
Hopefully that will change.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to write to NYRB Classics, asking
You
them.
should. With all your NYRB book clubs, you can throw your weight around.
Yeah.
There's certainly lots of sad coming of age stories out there. So
I don't know why. Probably it's the theme of the year.
Well, I think coming of age is typically not a very happy time for most of us. I don't know about your coming of age, but I'm still in the middle of my coming of age, and it's really sad, Cecilia. Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you.
Well, it's very interesting that I have a fellow booktuber on for a bite-sized book chat. I didn't realize that he had a booktube channel. His booktube channel is fairly new. It's called Bottle Imp Books. And welcome, Matthew, an Irish guy in Poland. Welcome to Bite-Sized Book Chats.
Hello, Sean. Pleasure to be with you.
Somebody who was my friend liked the fact that you were reading this book. So that's what got me onto the book. And then I befriended you, hoping that you would accept my friend request so that I could invite you on to talk about this book, and it all worked tickety-boo. So here we are. The book is incredibly obscure, and my eye always goes to them. So it's called Wandering Stone, The Streets of Old Izola by Rick Harsch. And you have just told me moments before we started to do this interview that Rick Harsch is a booktuber. My God. So take that where you will.
So Rick runs this small press, Corona Samizdat, and yeah, I guess a few people on BookTube are connected with him. And I don't know how I initially came across the press, but he's publishing quite a few really interesting writers. And I forget what I initially ordered from him, but then I discovered that he had written this book about Izola in Slovenia. And I was drawn to it because I really like books about place, which I think is quite a different sort of genre, or a different type of book to what we might term travel writing, which I'm not usually drawn to. Yeah.
So Rick Harsch lives in Slovenia, or did live there?
No, he lives there. He lives there. I don't know how long he's been living there, but I think it's a good few years. Yeah.
Okay. The description from his website, I'll put the link to his website where you can buy not only this book, but other books he's written and books by other writers, including quite a few Slovenian writers, translation. So tell us about Izola. So yeah, set it up. Where are we?
So we're on the Istrian Peninsula, just around the corner, or over from the Italian city of Trieste. So we're just over the border into Slovenia. And this little island of Izola is, it's your classic kind of contested territory, which is another thing that drew me to it. I'm always interested in these places where there's, slamming together of cultures, or a melting of cultures. I guess I've been linked over the years for various cities like that, or places like that. So Izola at one time was Venetian. It was under the Venetian Republic. And then it was under the Holy Roman Empire, under sort of German influence. Then it was Italian. Then it was taken by the Germans in World War II. Then it became part of the sort of independent Republic of Trieste in the wake of World War II. Then I think in the 1950s, it went to what was then Yugoslavia. So it's Slovenian, but part of Yugoslavia. And at that time, a lot of the Italians left. So it became a predominantly Slovene with an Italian minority, whereas it had previously been the other way. And with the collapse of the Yugoslavia, now it's, fully a part of Slovenia. But I think there's still a sizable Italian influence.
He is taking you, the reader, on a tour of the island street by street. Have I got that right? Yeah,
so it's, I suppose there are small elements of memoir. He recalls certain stories from his own life, but yeah, he's basically going around the island street by street, the old town, talking about aesthetics, the look of the place, the architecture, this influence of cultures, the etymology of the street names, and sort of biographical sketches as well, when he comes to street names, named after notable figures who are linked to the town in some way, or have historic significance.
Yeah, it really captures my imagination. Now, it has a lot of photographs in it by the German photographer Heinrich von Duitz. Can you show us a couple photographs?
Yeah, so there was one at the back actually caught my eye. It was see these nice shots of antique, the old window frames and door frames on the buildings, and earlier in the book there's more focus on the streets themselves.
That's lovely. So I think there's almost 300 photos. It's mostly text though.
Yeah, although it is a short read. You're getting the photographs, and then you're getting short text delving into aspects of each street.
It's one of the most unusual books I've ever heard of, and I'm completely fascinated. And you enjoyed it?
I did enjoy it very much. Yeah, I've always wanted to. I've always planned on writing something similar myself about places I've lived. I always look at the travel section in bookshops, and I see these books where a sort of journalist comes up with some novel idea about a journey they're going to make, and then they give you sort of whistle-stop tour of a country with some idea at the center of the book. And really it's just a book about a British journalist or something. It's really more about themselves than anything else, with bits of local flavor thrown in. But I like these books, like, I don't know if you've read Jan Morris.
No, I have not. I really want to.
Yeah, she wrote a wonderful book on Trieste, and she of course she wrote a very famous book on Venice. And this I see as a completely different kind of writing. This is about a much deeper connection with a specific place, and I'm always drawn to that. And
Wandering Stone is more of that ilk.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't really leave Izola. It's a street by street story of this place.
Is it quite new?
I became aware of his press through a couple of his other writers. Yeah, this one's just printed this year.
Okay, so quite new. And if you want a copy, I think I checked online, you have to buy it from him, and I'm going to.
Yeah, I think he said on his recent video that he's changing that. He's going to put some sort of online shop in place. But at the moment, you just send him an email, PayPal, and he'll post you the book.
And I think it's like 13 euros or something.
I've got 14
euros and plus shipping. But that's doable. So, well, this is fascinating. So to finish off, Matthew, give us a 1-minute elevator pitch for your channel. What do you do over there on Bottle Imp Books?
Well, recently I've been doing a series of videos on Borges. My main thing recently has been Borges in the 1970s did a selection of, he kind of curated a series of books, short stories that he loved, writers who had influenced him. And there were 33 books in the collection. So I've been going through that week by week and reading the short stories of the people he picked. And again, if you're interested in discovering obscure things, there are quite a few writers on the list. They're now quite hard to find, but quite brilliant. And I'm also very into my Poetry Thursdays, and I'm a great lover of poetry on BookTube.
That's fantastic. You read a lot of interesting stuff, maybe nothing quite as obscure as the one we've talked about today, but I'm really drawn to a lot of what you're reading. So I hope that people will go check out your channel, and I hope you'll come back to mine for another bite-sized book chat.
Oh yeah, anytime, Sean. It was lovely.
Thank you very much.